Well, things move fast when it comes to the NFL. We've quickly shifted from scouting combine mode to NFL free agency. Today, we're going to look at some of the prime landing spots to help you get on top of the moves that have already happened and the ones that are about to happen. I'm Bob Harris. This is the Audible YouTube channel, and it's time to go on the hot seat. First, footballguys.com. That's the website. You'll find me here every Tuesday throughout the offseason, touching on topics of interest to fantasy investors. Hit the subscribe button, the notification bell if you haven't already done that. If you've done those things, like us, share us, do all the things you need to do to make the algorithm happy. We appreciate that. And as always, as we do on the hot seat here, we have a fantastic guest to help us sort things out this week. We're getting the ball rolling with a new football guy, Colton Dodgson. First timer on the program. You can follow him on Twitter at FFCDodd. FFCDodd, just like it's spelled. Welcome, Colton. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Calling me a fantastic guest too. Wow, I really appreciate that.
If anyone's out there, go ahead Colton's Twitter feed. You'll find a lot of his video work. I've been following along, do fantastic stuff, and so we've had a lot going on. By the way, we're just on the cusp of the 2024 rookie draft guide. Version 2 will be updated with updated player profiles and all the stats reflected from the measurements from the scouting combine, the RAS scores, strengths, weaknesses, everything you need. So be ready for that. Comes out Wednesday, the 12th. If you've already watched this or you're watching this after then, go get it. Just go to the main page of the site, sign up. You can download that free, and then you can upgrade as we go later into the season. So be ready for that. We're going to talk about some of the free agent moves that have already happened here. And it started fast and furious. We're recording this Monday afternoon, so there'll be plenty of moves that happen between now and the time we're done. But some of the things that we've already known about started early. Colton, I think they started on Saturday. Mike Gesicki re-signing with the Bengals. Hollywood Brown in Kansas City. Geno Smith traded to the Raiders, left a big hole in the Seattle quarterback room, which they filled today with Sam Darnold. That was kind of expected, the Minnesota quarterback. Zach Ertz re-signed with the Commanders. Aaron Jones, the Vikings. Devontae Adams signed with the Rams. Then the second foot the shoe dropped in Seattle when DK Metcalf was traded to Steelers. Big move there. We may talk about that when we discuss the Steelers. Josh Allen got a big contract extension. He is now the highest paid player in the NFL. $250 million guaranteed. Myles Garrett got the contract done with Cleveland as well, so good news for him. Monday afternoon items, as soon as the legal tampering period began, we saw things like Darnold to Seattle, Justin Fields signed with the Jets, and a bit of a surprise, I think, for me anyway. Talk that he was still a target in Pittsburgh, maybe Russell Wilson, maybe Aaron Rodgers targets there. Chris Godwin re-signed with the Bucs as expected. There were some other outlier plays. We'll discuss those over the course of the coming days on various channels here at Football Guys, the Fantasy Football channel, the Dynasty channel, and the Audible channel. So be sure you are subscribed to all three. I want to jump into the quarterback destinations, right? So
let's do it.
We can say like, it's pretty safe to say that Seattle has filled their need and they are no longer on the market as of now. Probably Las Vegas. They may still dabble in the draft, but done with in terms of free agency. But there's still plenty of teams looking for help at the position. I think first and foremost, the Cleveland Browns. Just talk a little bit about their situation and what your expectation is for them. Is this more of a draft issue? They still need a starter or at least a bridge. What do you think?
Yeah, the Browns are interesting. I feel like with all of these other destinations and everything like that, we've heard at least some rumblings, right? Or like maybe they're looking at this guy. Like it seemed like Justin Fields to the Jets was pretty well covered. Same with Darnold to the Vikings after they made, or to the Seahawks, my bad, after they made the Geno Smith trade, all of those things. I feel like with Cleveland though, it's been tough to get a read on them. I don't know if you feel that way as well, but I know they're in Cam Ward striking distance if they decide that he's their guy, if he's a guy that that they like. I also looked at, I know you mentioned the bridge option. That could be another option for them as well too. Like I think the best way to go about it for Cleveland, and I know it's this quarterback class is sort of well documented as not being the strongest, right? So that's why I emphasize if they have a guy up there that they want to get, they certainly are in position to do that. Or there's somebody like Jameis Winston out there who has that familiarity, those sorts of things, right? There's certainly options, but Cleveland's been tough to get a read on. I think that's going to be a team I watch in the draft when it comes to quarterbacks. And I would not be surprised to see them add one of those veteran bridge guys that you mentioned as well.
Yeah, the lack of urgency is kind of what surprised me a little bit. There's been
Yeah.
no real discussion about it. They reworked again the contract for Deshaun Watson, to kicking some more cap money down the road a little bit, and they're going to owe a
Yeah.
lot of money at some point on that. He's going to make all 230 million. I think they've only paid out like 80 million against the cap so far, and so that's going to come due. But
Yeah.
that lack of urgency, it kind of does lead me to think it's going to be the draft and maybe a bridge. And Jameis Winston, familiarity is with him, and there haven't been a lot of noise, and they don't seem to be that interested. But maybe that's part of the plan. Indianapolis is another team that's looking for competition for Anthony Richardson. Just start out. What are your thoughts on Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I almost feel like this has been sort of my purveying thought around the Colts, right? I almost feel like this has been a disaster class in how to develop a quarterback, right? They go out and they get Anthony Richardson a couple years ago, and I think the main, at least going into that draft, the main thing with Richardson was the tools are outstanding. We've seen the tools, the deep ball, all of that stuff. It's all insane, but he needed polish, right? Coming into the league, he needed that polish, and they just haven't seemed to have much of a development plan in place for Richardson, right? He played early, he did all of those things, and it didn't necessarily seem as though he was ready to do all of that. I feel like this might be another veteran spot because of the investment that they've made in Richardson. It doesn't seem like they're giving much of an indication that they're ready to move off of that. I think this is a very important year for Richardson, obviously, right? That feels like the layup of the century there. It's Richardson's make or break year, but I feel like they need to bring somebody in who can assist with that development. We kind of saw it a little bit with Andy Dalton and Bryce Young in
Right.
Carolina. That was kind of a wonky situation with Young getting benched and all that. But a situation like that, especially if you're trying to see if this can be your guy with Richardson, I think is the best option for the Colts at this point. I don't know if there's much out there that would give them a better chance to win in the short term and in the long term, given the investment they've already made with Richardson.
Yeah, you wonder the way their offense is going to be designed for Richardson. If like a Daniel Jones wouldn't be somebody who can kind of pull that off or something. But we'll
Right.
see. But I think you're right. I think the thing that's that surprises me is they knew who Anthony Richardson was. They knew what he was, and like he's still this super high upside guy. I mean, we see
Yeah.
it when he has the big games. At least from our purposes, the fantasy output's been fantastic. He had the 20+ point games last year, and then he had a bunch of he had duds. They need to get more of those 20+ point games and fewer duds, but they also need to maybe work the offense a little more. And I was surprised Shane Steichen coming from the background where he developed two rookies or two young quarterbacks,
Mhm.
Justin Herbert in Los Angeles with one approach, and then just Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia with a different approach. You would have thought he would have had the experience and the savvy to figure this out. It seems like it's eluded him to this point. Maybe it's just a lack of patience. Minnesota Vikings seem like they're going to start J.J. McCarthy. I mentioned Daniel Jones. He is still there, or was last on their roster. Maybe he returns. Is that a situation where we're pretty certain it's going to be a J.J. McCarthy now that they've moved on so quickly from Darnold without putting up much fight?
Yeah, I feel like that has to be the road they go down, right? If you make the investment, another situation where they invested a first round pick in McCarthy, not obviously, a little later than like the Colts with Richardson, but whatever it may be, they still liked him enough to make him a first round pick and first round pick. They sort of caught lightning in a bottle with Darnold. It feels like the season Sam Darnold had was not something that I think very many people were expecting. But I also feel like the outcome here with Darnold moving on, and obviously there was a lot made of him not being tagged earlier in the week and all of those things. I almost feel like earlier last week, I almost feel like that was sort of the most likely outcome from the jump, right? Is you got what you got out of Sam Darnold. He'll probably move on. And now JJ McCarthy, because of injury, right, had that extra year to sort of get his feet underneath him and get used to that NFL speed and all of those things in terms of just like taking it all in from a mental standpoint, right? Obviously, he couldn't play, but I think he's got to have the chance here to start based on the investment that they made in him. But you mentioned Daniel Jones. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of, this is one of the more quarterback friendly systems in the NFL with Kevin O'Connell. And he was there last year. We mentioned the familiarity with Jameis Winston too. I don't know if Daniel Jones is going to be somebody that teams are lining up to start, right?
Right.
So it seems to make sense that he would want to go back and be a part of that quarterback room, maybe serve as more of a mentor now, with maybe a shot to play if things go in a different direction, right? I feel like that makes a lot of sense on both sides for Daniel Jones and for the Vikings. So that would be my expectation. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with it when you introed the Vikings there.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I'm with you there. Talked a little bit about the Giants and Pittsburgh, both, the buzz on Monday, and maybe this will be resolved by the time you're watching this video on Tuesday. Was Aaron Rodgers, who's playing off between the New York Giants and Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers just land a big asset in DK Metcalf. First question there, just like, can DK Metcalf and George Pickens coexist in a single in the same offense? That's, as my friend Jeff Vance said yesterday on the X device, that's a very explosive receiving core, and I don't think he meant on the field. So,
Yeah.
and obviously, for whoever the quarterback is, both these spots, I think the Giants with Malik Neighbors, and it seems like having a good piece there. Which of these spots do you think is ideal?
Yeah, I think, oh man, with the weapons at both in both situations, right? I think Malik Neighbors is already ascended to be, if we're talking fantasy, I mean, maybe one of the top. I think the floor is one of the top 5 receivers, if
Sure.
not top 3, next year and beyond too. I think that's desirable. You talked about, the double-edged sword with the explosion in Pittsburgh with DK and Pickens. I
Lead the
think there's a
league
lot.
in 15-yard penalties.
There you go. Yeah. I think there's a lot of intrigue with Pickens too. We've kind of seen this history of Mike Tomlin, growing tired of the antics at the receiver position, that sort of thing. Is this are they even going to take the field together? I think is a valid question. If they do, you said it. This is an extremely explosive duo on the field. I mean, and
Yeah, both.
yeah, exactly. I think Pittsburgh is certainly still in quarterback purgatory, and there's so much made about Mike Tomlin and his ability to finish seasons with winning records, but this is kind of the downside to that, right? Is they're never really in a position to be championship contenders, right? But they're always playoffs, fringe playoffs, and they're not really in striking distance. We saw it with the Kenny Pickett experiment too. It's an ideal situation, I think, for a quarterback coming into Pittsburgh. But it seems like they're going to have to go the veteran route here,
Right.
right? Unless this is also an interesting quarterback draft in terms of guys that could be developmental projects, guys with tools that might not necessarily be ready to start. Is that an option for them, right? Go out and land somebody in the later rounds, somebody that you can develop a little bit, like Jackson Dart seems to be climbing a little bit. I don't even know if
Yeah.
he's in that category anymore. But like a Jalen Milrow or a Quinn Ewers or somebody like that who can maybe sit behind a veteran and then take over. It's certainly, if Pickens and Metcalf take the field together, it's certainly going to be a desirable position.
Yeah, I agree. And we mentioned Seattle getting Darnold, that takes them pretty much out of the free agent market. And Tennessee still has needs a quarterback. There have heard no buzz or anything, so that's maybe one we'll watch for the draft. I wanted to look at the running backs now, and you look at the available talent, and it's it's all right. As we sit here and record, Najee Harris, J.K. Dobbins, Rico Dowdle, Javonte Williams, Jamal Williams, Kenneth Gainwell, Raheem Mostert, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb. I don't know. We'll see. And so you look at the list of teams with needs, and I'm not sure if it's the Chicago with DeAndre Swift. We saw how Detroit worked with Ben Johnson, running the offense with a duo. Does DeAndre Swift seem like a good fit there? And do they need, whether it's through the draft or free agency, to add somebody?
Yeah, I don't know if Swift necessarily panned out last season. You saw the flashes primarily with like explosive plays, right? Picking up, the 40 and 50-yard gains. But in terms of all of those metrics, he was still near the middle of the pack in terms of running backs who got a lot of run last year, right? In terms of attempts and things like that. He wasn't overly explosive. He wasn't overly efficient running the ball. I'm not necessarily sure. I don't know how big his role will be, but I know that Chicago probably needs to go out and address that position. Especially, you talked about Ben Johnson and what he likes to do with that scheme. It's very it's heavily predicated on play action, right? And they've addressed the offensive line a ton. We've seen that through free agency.
Yeah.
Drew Gallman, Joe Tooney, Jonah Jackson, all of these guys. They know that there's a sense of urgency there, right? They know they need to address that. But you also need to go out and find a running back that defenses need to account for, right? Defenses need to be on their heels a little bit with, or on their toes a little bit with, so to speak. And I don't know if Swift is that guy. Roshan Johnson kind of projects as more of a change of pace guy. I really think Ben Johnson needs to go out and find that surefire number one running back. And it's certainly a good draft to need that. So
Yeah, a quick reminder: the two worked together in Detroit in 2022, and then DeAndre Swift left after that. You wonder how ideal he thinks he is. Dallas, probably the biggest, most glaring need. Like it seems like always we're thinking, oh, that Cowboys running back is going to be great. They could go in the draft. Denver, moving on likely from Javonte Williams, seems like a great landing spot for draft talent. Kansas City, they made an addition on Monday with Elijah Mitchell going from San Francisco to there. Las Vegas, a big opening. Chargers, depending on what happens with J.K. Dobbins, they released Gus Edwards. Minnesota, they land Aaron Jones. Do they feel like he's the full, ready to continue? Like it was a career year in terms of touches. I think he had 700 touches was a career high last year. He's heading into his 31 season. I'm not sure how good that works. And then Pittsburgh with Jaylen Warren, they tendered him on Monday. So they're moving on likely from Najee Harris. Of those destinations, is Denver probably the one we should be looking at most closely for like fantasy purposes?
I think so. I think there's no obvious like heir apparent, right? I don't necessarily think I think he struggled a lot last season, Javonte Williams. You saw flashes from somebody like, Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime. You saw little moments out of them, but Sean Payton wants to run the ball and he doesn't really have the personnel to do it. They only ran on 35% of their offensive plays last season, and they still targeted running backs on 21% of dropbacks. So there's a void in that offense that if you can go out and find a guy who projects as maybe a 3-down back, we're kind of shifting in the NFL back to that model a little bit. It's hard to track. But if you can find somebody who can fill that void, there's a receiving share there. There's a running back, like a void on the ground there too. I think there's a real fit for a top level option here. And if they land it, I think the outlook is favorable for fantasy, whoever that may be.
I would agree with that, and I feel like Sean Payton has always used a two-back system. We can go back to Reggie Bush, Pierre Thomas. There's always been like a receiving portion of his attack, and maybe Jaleel McLaughlin could stay in that role, but he does need the hammer, and they don't have that right now with Javonte Williams moving on. Vegas is another one. Pete Carroll likes to run the ball and play defense. Geno Smith in place now as his quarterback. This seems like another one. It's a deep draft class. It feels like there will be a lot of teams looking there, but it does seem like Najee Harris might be a good fit there. We'll see how that plays out. I do like some of the destinations. The Chargers, in addition, I mean, we view this as a run heavy offense. Wasn't as run heavy as some of the past offenses we've seen from Greg Roman, who, by the way, has run some pass heavy offenses over the course of his career. I think back to Buffalo. There was a year where they were a pass heavy. Baltimore's had a year, but just your thoughts on the Chargers offense in general.
Yeah, I think when you have a guy like Justin Herbert, you have to throw the ball as much as they seemingly wanted to be that ground and pound team. Herbert is still somebody that you need looks there in the passing game for. You said it. Dobbins is a free agent. Gus Edwards was cut. That running back room is pretty desolate right now. 41% rush rate. That was 10th in the NFL. So they still did run a ton, but it wasn't necessarily every other play, right? You kind of mentioned that, but clearly a team that wants to run and they need an option that can. at the range, you wonder, as with some of these guys climbing, is that something that they'll address early?
Right.
Are they looking more at the top end of this running back class, or are they more focused on the depth? And if they're more focused on the depth, maybe somebody like Dobbins makes sense returning to the Chargers, right? In that second wave of free agency or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. But this is certainly a favorable landing spot too. I know you mentioned you were excited about the Chargers, and with good reason. I think there is a void here that could lead to some serious production.
Yeah, in an ideal world, I'd love to see Dobbins go back there. I think he's a good fit for the scheme. Needs to stay healthy, needs to prove that, and we'll see how much they're willing to pay him. We need to move on to the wide receivers here. I think Buffalo Bills, just looking at the teams that need help, Buffalo comes right to mind. Amari Cooper likely moving on. They've got Keon Coleman. I don't know if he'll ever emerge as a true alpha. Do you have thoughts on him?
Yeah, I looked into him a little bit a couple of days ago, and I was actually I know a lot is made about the lack of separation. He led the league in lowest separation among wide receivers last season with Marvin Harrison Jr. In terms of like the distance he's putting between corners and all of those things. He's definitely more of a contested catch deep threat. I think he has some of those ball skills, obviously a big frame, all of those things. He's definitely not going to be a burner, though. That's something that they lack, is that downfield element. Khalil Shakir got extended too. We know that he's more of that behind the line of scrimmage, short pass game, high percentage looks sort of guy. And then the Josh Palmer addition too. That obviously they're looking to address that downfield option. I think the thing with the Bills is they relied on Josh Allen so much last season to spread the ball around. There wasn't a huge target share in this offense because of how often they were spreading that ball around. So I don't know. It's hard to project what they might do. It seems like they're looking at that speed archetype guy, right, with Josh Palmer. And so maybe they look to address some depth in the draft, maybe a high upside guy who could emerge to be maybe beat out Josh Palmer or play a role in that offense in some capacity downfield.
I think such a huge hole for this offense, and I do think I think Coleman has one thing going for him. It seemed like Josh Allen at least trusts him, right? Like
Yeah.
was willing to throw at him. That may be just a Josh Allen thing. He's willing to trust anybody.
Yeah.
But the addition to Josh Palmer seems like another like the latest. Like he's a level above Matt Collins and probably Curtis Samuel, etc. But it doesn't feel like it's a huge step up from one of those moves. And we'll see. Amari Cooper will be floating around out there. Dallas needs a wide receiver too. Denver, we've got Cortland Sutton there, big physical threat, but Marvin Mims and Devon Vele, they've shown promise. Don't know if they're the answer. I think Green Bay is a team that probably, to me, I kind of had visions of Devontae Adams dancing in my head before he went back and signed. He wanted to stay on the West Coast, and he gets that wish. It's going to be a great pairing with him and Puka Nacua and the Sean McVay offense with Matthew Stafford. I think some good things will happen there. Green Bay, they're not going to have Christian Watson early on. Is there any? This seems like a great landing spot to me.
Yeah, there's certainly a void, and so many people would point at all of the receivers that they have in that receiving room because so much has been made about all of the dart throws that they've taken at wide receiver, right? But it seems like they all kind of project into the same profile. You've got the Jaden Reeds, right? The slot guys, the smaller frame. Romeo Dobbs, he's been a little better at pushing the ball downfield, stretching the defense a little bit. But then it seems to just be a lot of those depth guys, and without Christian Watson, who was their shot play threat, right? The downfield speed guy, so to speak. That element of because he'll probably miss the first half of the season, given how late the injury was. So that element of the offense is gone too. I think you're absolutely right. There is an opportunity here, especially with Jordan Love and his ability to push the ball downfield and do all of those things, the arm talent there. There's an opportunity here for a wide receiver who can stretch the field. I'm not sure who could potentially fill that void, right, in free agency or any of those things.
Like some of the leftovers at the moment don't seem appealing to Mark
Yeah,
Cooper. Maybe
that's what I was
his
thinking,
run.
right?
And by the way, you look at the rookies, and if you're ready for it, the 2025 rookie draft guide, the version 2 available Wednesday this week. Be sure you get on that. Tons of wide receiver help in there. And also more stuff from Colton Dodgson at FFC Dodd. So follow him, watch his videos there. Moving on to some of the other teams, like Kansas City seems like they kind of the re-signing of Marquise Brown kind of gives them maybe enough bodies. I think they'll be lurking around and adding other pieces. We'll see what happens with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. A little off-field issue this past weekend. Doesn't seem like it's going to amount to anything, at least for now that we know of. The Rams bring in Devontae Adams, so their needs are kind of filled. The Chargers, though, we've got the child prodigy, Lad McConkey, looking fantastic as the slot man. Seems like he needs a true alpha. They could use an alpha here. What do you think of that? Like Quentin Johnston showed improvement, but doesn't feel like he's ready for prime time.
No, you're absolutely right. And so much is made of the hands with Quentin Johnston, right? And the drop rates and all of those things. Lad McConkey, slot extraordinaire, right? He's seems like he's projected to become one of the elite slot options in the NFL, especially based on the rookie season, if he can build on that. And that's a great option for Herbert to have in that pass game, right? For him to just eat up yardage in the short and intermediate parts of the field. Now with Josh Palmer moving on and Quentin Johnston still waiting to take that step, if that step is even, in him, so to speak, they do need that perimeter option. They need somebody to stretch the field and give Herbert some more options. He's done a lot with not a whole lot, especially last year, right? Like, Lad McConkey emerged, but early on there, it didn't seem like there were very many options for him. So I think the time is now for the Chargers to go out and find somebody who can stretch that field a little bit and give Herbert more options in the passing game, right? You need to surround these guys with options they can trust. Herbert, one of the elite, I think he's one of the elite arms in the NFL. So to keep keep life simple for him, so to speak.
Right.
That's an element of this offense that needs to be addressed.
You look at the list of players remaining again, we've had Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin already off the board in the initial wave. Marquise Brown no longer available. De'Ami Brown from Commanders, he's no longer available. He's signed with the Jaguars. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, we could bring the band back together. Not sure that's going to happen there. So Tyler Lockett available. Don't know if he checks any boxes either. This may be more of a draft situation for this team, which would make sense. New England, we expected to be big players at wide receiver. They were not. Feels like they're waiting for the draft, like at this point, right? Like, I mean, one of their biggest, and they spent big on defense Monday. I mean, like way big. They had the most cap room, so good for them for investing wildly, but we really expected wide receiver help. Tell us what they need, like offensive line help and receiver help to make Drake May a thing, because he looks like he could be that.
Yeah, and it seemed like when the DK Metcalf trade request came down,
right,
everybody's favorite dream scenario was DK Metcalf joining Drake May and providing that number one threat to help a young quarterback take another step, a lot like another Ole Miss receiver with AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts, right? Early in Hurts' career. Right. So, that seemed to be the dream projection. That didn't come to fruition. And you're looking at Chris Godwin was heavily projected to be somebody that the Patriots would be interested in. That didn't come to fruition, right? It seems like they had all of this money to spend in free agency, and high up on the list of priorities was going to be an option, finding a number one receiver option for Drake May. It just hasn't panned out. They brought back Austin Hooper and right. repaired him with Hunter Henry. It's something, right? It doesn't really move the needle, but they're trying, and that's got to be the number one priority when you have a young guy who showed the promise that May did last season. You have to surround him with talent, and you have to protect him too, right? And the offensive line will also need to be something that they address, much like everybody else is. It doesn't seem like there's been any marquee moves at that position right. for the Patriots, but it's tough to just keep saying draft situation, but it really does seem like that's what a lot of these
draft
teams
class, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like, this is not the ideal draft class. And so I feel like with New England, like pre-draft trade, some kind of blockbuster kind of thing, like we've seen the last few years, like you mentioned AJ Brown, or we can think to multiple pre-draft trades that have like come up. Marquise Brown was another one. So maybe we see something along those lines. there are a couple other teams. Seattle suddenly has a huge need at wide receiver, right? Without DK Metcalf. I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba love what he's doing, but beyond Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, was there much there? I don't think so. San Francisco moves on from Deebo Samuel. A lot of uncertainty with Brandon Ayuk starting out. Love Jawan Jennings, but don't know that he is a true alpha. Last year's week 2 or what's it, week 3, second highest scoring total of the season.
Yeah, he
Like
always
he can
has
have
one
big
of
games,
those. He's
right?
got one of those every season.
Ricky Pearsall looks like he will be a thing though, so we'll kind of see how that one plays out. In Tennessee, Tyler Boyd and Nick Westbrook-Akine are both available as free agents. They need someone to pair with Calvin Ridley. We'll see if they get that. I wanted to touch on tight ends before we call it a day here. The list of teams I have, let's see if this matches up with what you have, Colton.
Okay.
Chicago, if we're going to run that Ben Johnson style offense, maybe Cole Kmet's a great fit for that. Maybe not. Denver, Evan Ingram, who was released by the Jacksonville Jaguars, visiting on Monday. So we'll see what goes on there. But Sean Payton, there are a lot of tight ends that he can lean into. Indianapolis seems like they have a perennial need. Kansas City, possibly with, Travis Kelce is returning, but Noah Gray, but maybe it's time to add there. The Chargers, as much as I love Will Dissly, I'm not sure he is the answer there. New England seems like they've solidified what they were going to do. New Orleans could release Taysom Hill. Juwan Johnson's a free agent. And one that I think is not on people's radar, there's a lot of talk about Dallas Goedert being traded in Philadelphia or maybe not returning. Philadelphia, what do you think of these landing spots?
Yeah, the Eagles one is so interesting to me, and not because of, all the Eagles gear behind me, right? But Goddard this seems like the perfect moment for the Eagles to look to their next chapter at tight end. We saw it with when they drafted Goddard, right, to
Right.
play behind Ertz, and
Hurts.
this potential guy probably wouldn't have an opportunity to play behind Goddard unless the deal is restructured, something happens there, because the cap number is as high as it is. He's 30 years old. Even Grant Calcaterra is still under contract for one more season. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of uncertainty at tight end, despite the fact that they got a lot of production out of Goddard last season, especially in the running game when he was healthy. So it's a situation where the Eagles are definitely a team to monitor here, especially because of how deep this tight end class is. I wouldn't be surprised if they went and addressed the position early, like day 2.
Right.
So that's an interesting one. And then the New Orleans one too, because of that Kellen Moore fit. Could Goddard be a fit there? Who knows? I mean, you're just looking at those possible connections, but the New Orleans to Eagles pipeline is one that I'll be
Right.
watching too.
It's funny because I do think this huge draft class, and we look, and now that Gesicki and Ertz have already done deals, you're talking Evan Ingram is the apex predator out there at the position,
Yeah.
followed by Tyler Conklin, Juwan Johnson. There's not a lot out there. This feels like it's going to go draft heavy. So watch for all these teams to make moves in the draft. So there's kind of setting the table on some of the needs and how some of the needs have been filled by the players who have already gone off the board Monday. We'll see what happens Tuesday. As you listen to this recording, there may have been some moves made. We'll see what happens with Aaron Rodgers and some of the big names. Running backs have not moved yet, so that'll be happening. We'll come back next week on the hot seat and examine all those. One more time, though, I want you to go out, download if you don't have version 1, go ahead and get version 1. Version 2, though, of the 2025 Rookie Draft Guide will be available Wednesday, March 12th, and you cannot miss it. Tons of good information, updated player profiles, everything you need, RAS scores, combine grades, everything you need with great assessments by our crew there. And also, check out Colton Dodgson's timeline on Twitter at FFC Dodd. Great video content. You've got my eye, Colton. How often are you doing stuff? What can people expect?
I'm currently posting videos daily. I also, the timeline might be reworked a little bit. Daily is ambitious. I've been able to do it for about a month. I might rework. I still want to post at the very least every other day is something that will be the floor. But as of right now, daily videos on my YouTube channel is it's called Scramble Drill with Colton Dodgson. That's my YouTube channel. It's linked on my Twitter as well. But that's where I post all my video content. Talk a lot of right now it's a lot of free agent projections, a lot of the stuff we just did here, draft stuff. So if you're into that sort of thing, go check it out. There's my humble plug.
Do it. I love your work. You do a great job on the video.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on today. Won't be the last time I have you here. That's it for On the Hot Seat this week. We'll see you next week with more free agent information and some final destinations for all the players we talked about today. Thanks for stopping by.